Welcome to a webinar on intelligent automation in local government. And next slide, please. My name's Ian McGregor and I'm from UiPath. I'm responsible for the public sector business at UiPath. And together with T-Impact, we're bringing you this third in a series of 3 webinars on discussing how and why to automate in local authorities. The agenda for the next hour or so is action-packed. We are going to have a little bit of a review of what is automation, just so that everybody understands, is on the same page. And then we're going to go into an idea to bot session, which is really talking about how you get started in RPA, how you choose the right processes, how you engage with the business, how you qualify, quantify a process to be automated. And that's an explanation of, what is an idea to bot. And the idea of that is for you to take away and think about it. And then if you want to discuss further, come back with actions. That's been delivered by Dean from UiPath. And then, if you like, the heart of the day is Rocco from Oxford City Council is really going to talk about their RPA journey to date. The good, what could be, and what can be improved on, and their experiences. And then after Rocco, Keith from T-Impact is going to talk about a step-step guide to, as you say, they're delivering your RPA program. What's the good and the bad, right and wrongs. Q&A. If you have any questions, we're very keen to hear them. Unfortunately, due to the format of this webinar, we'll collate all questions till the end. So there is a box on your screen, on the lower half of your screen, for you to load questions. Please put them in there, and then we will go through the questions within the question and answer session at the end, and then we'll be finished hopefully in time. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So just to revise, what is RPA? Robotic Process Automation is the automation of repetitive rules-based tasks that businesses do day in, day out, that individuals do within businesses day in, day out. Now these processes, and it could be like cutting and pasting from a spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, could be extracting data out of an ERP system, a finance system, and getting approvals, could be reading emails, something that individuals do day in, day out. In their own right, they may not take very long and they don't cost very much. But when that individual does tens, hundreds, thousands a day, and when there are tens, hundreds of thousands of people doing the same processes, that certainly adds up. And by automating that, then there are benefits that are readily and quickly accrued, like quality, speed, employee satisfaction for not having to do the drudgery and being able to concentrate on more creative stuff. Citizen or customer experience is improved because they get accurate, quick responses. All these things, and costs, obviously, the cost could be lower by automating. All these benefits are well documented and well proven out there, and there are use cases all over the place now. So robotic process automation is no longer an early adopter technology. It is very much mainstream. I should say, I've been reminded, I should say that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available after the session finishes. So a link will be posted out. So thank you for reminding me of that. So that is what RPA is. And in the previous 2 webinars, we've talked about it in more detail. But now we really want to decide, well, actually, okay, I understand what RPA is, but how do I decide in my business where to start? What are the best processes, or who do I speak to, or what is the benefit? How do I measure the pain I've got at the moment? And UiPath has a program called Idea to Bot, which is free, I should add to begin with, but it's all about helping you objectify your journey to automation. And I'm going to pass over to Dean now, who's going to talk about Idea to Bot in more detail. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Ian. So when I've been working with customers and prospects at UiPath, a lot of them really struggle with, where do I start? Or they come to us with one idea, but that idea may not be the best idea for automation within their business. So what we did is we came up with the Idea to Bot workshop as a way to help our customers to be able to, firstly, identify, qualify, measure, and potentially implement those ideas in the right order. so that we can really unlock the right value at the right time within those organizations. Now, before COVID-19, we were doing these face-to-face, and we've adapted them now to be able to do them in a virtual way using Teams or Zooms or WebEx or whatever your preferred web meeting is. And over the last few months, we've done a number of these, and we've really helped some organizations get started with automation in the current climate. So Karen, if you'd like to advance to the next slide, please. So what is it? Well, first of all, we can help you to unlock the value in your service lines. So in many organizations, you'll have bottlenecks, you will have challenges, you will have resource constraints. And so we can help you to unlock the value that is kind of within those parts of the business. And we can help to qualify your automation ideas. So one of the challenges that many organizations face is this the right process to be automating? Should we make some changes to it before we automate it? And we can help with that qualification, making sure that you're addressing the right automation candidates first. And we can help you to build a business case, because it's not good enough to identify the right opportunity for automation. You know, you may have a very good process, but you spend 1 hour a month doing it. That's probably not a good candidate. It's probably not a good business case behind it. It may help from a proof of concept to show that something can be automated in your organization, but it's important that we have a business case behind that as well. Advance, please, Karen. So what can we start to discover? So let's kind of look at some of these. So you advance, please. So we can get insights into what can be automated in your organization. So when I've done these workshops with other organizations, and I'll be honest with you, predominantly this has been in local governments, in healthcare, in the public sector. It's really been eye-opening where some of those bottlenecks are within the business. And it's only when we start to ask some structured questions and guide you in your thinking that we can really gain those insights. You move forward, please, Karen. What it also does is helps to increase the number of automated processes within your organization. When I first joined UiPath about 18 months ago, quite often my conversations with the companies I was working with were, we have this one process, we'd like to automate it. But in order to get the true value from automation, you should be looking beyond that one process. So this workshop format really allows you to see what the potential is within your organization. And at longer term, then know what kind of investment do you need to be making, but also what can those returns be as well. You can advance, please, Karen. And now to understand what information is needed to progress, because all too often I'll talk to organizations and I'll say, okay, do you know how many transactions you're doing? Do you know how long they take? And a lot of that information isn't available, or they don't know it. So we can help you to see what kind of questions you need to be going back into the business and asking in order to gain that insight and to help with that building of a business case. You advance, please, Karen. So from an attendee perspective, what sort of things do we need to be thinking about? Can you advance, please, Karen? So there's a number of activities we do. We have with you a planning call. So the planning call is where we would say, okay, what does this workshop need to look like for you and your organization? When are we looking to have the first call with the employees, the people in the organization? Who should be attending? Which service lines do we want to be involving? So we're really making sure that we've got all the I's dots and the T's crossed to make sure we understand kind of what we need to do with this workshop in your organization. You advance, please, Karen. We use a tool called Automation Hub. This is one of UiPath's products. We provide it with a 60-day evaluation license. And what we do with that is we help you to get that set up, to configure it to you and your organization, to help you to understand how to add users into there, so that when we have the kickoff call, you start advance, please, Karen. The kickoff call is going to be maybe an hour to 2 hours, depending on your organization. And I've also done others that have been 5 hours. And what we did with those is we invited in a number of different service lines, and we gave them maybe an hour and a half to an hour each to share their ideas. And what we're doing in that kickoff call is we're showing you how we submit ideas into Automation Hub, how we qualify those ideas, and potentially even start to build a business case around one of them. And so, as I say, we can either do it with the entire kind of audience in one call. We show you how to submit an idea, then you go away and submit them yourselves, or We can have service line specific calls where we essentially help you to enter those ideas initially and start to help you to understand the kind of information you need. The next step is to, you've answered please, Karen, is we have a drop-in call. The drop-in call may be a week later. And what we do in that drop-in call is we say, okay, let's keep a call open for an hour. It may be Teams, it may be Zoom, it may be WebEx again, depending on what your preference is. And we keep that call open for an hour. And people can drop in, ask a question, and then drop out again. So it's not a big commitment of their time. It's just a point where they know they can call in, ask their questions, overcome any challenges they have, and then move on. And then the next step, if you'd have answered with Karen, is a review call. So we typically do this with the main stakeholders within those service lines. And what we do is we look through the automation candidates that you've identified, that you've qualified, may even built some business cases against them. And we start to see, well, based on our expertise and our understanding, how can we guide you to where you want to go next? So really, the purpose of this workshop is to go from nothing to having a qualified automation pipeline that is then prioritized in the right way and with a roadmap and a path to starting automation within your organization. Can you move to the next slide, please, Karen? So how do we make it happen? So I talked about the planning call. So there's some of the things that go into that. You can build the whole slide, please, Karen, then we won't be. So we agree the attendees. So we agree which people are going to come in, which service lines are going to come in. We agree the call dates, make sure we have that based on people's availability. And we agree how this is going to be communicated internally within your organization. Then we go and add the team to Automation Hub. So we have an Excel document that you can literally just add the people's names and the email addresses into the tool. And you go ahead and you complete that. We then upload that into Automation Hub. And sorry for that. We then nominate some attendees to complete the Automation Hub account setup. So there'll be somebody maybe within your organization that may be a little more technical. In the kickoff call, 1 to 2 hours, as I said, depending on the number of ideas, the number of people, the number of service lines. We give a demonstration of Automation Hub, how we submit an idea. And I use a use case to do that. Sorry, just my home phone's ringing. It's the dangers of doing webinars in the current climate. So we then start to submit ideas with the attendees. We perform a business assessment, as I said. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about the interruptions there. We perform a business assessment, potentially with one of those ideas, to give you some idea of the kind of questions you needed to be asking the business, and then an opportunity for you to ask further questions. Move forward, please, Karen. So in the drop-in call, as I say, it's about an hour long. People can drop in, drop out again, get clarification on any points, and we can help with any specific questions that they have. And this has been really useful with other customers where people that have said, I'm not sure how to answer this question, or I'm not sure whether this is the right approach that I'm taking. Should I break this into 2 processes? Should I combine 2 processes into 1? So we can really help with consolidating those ideas. And the final step in that review call, as I say, is held with the main stakeholders within the organization. We review the ideas that have been submitted. We explore the automations that we potentially want to take forward for development, and we can help with success criteria. And in some of those, we may say, well, we've implemented something similar in another organization, and these were some of the benefits that we got. And so we can really start to share based on the use cases and the opportunities you identify, where some of the value, where some of the successes are. Next slide, please, Karen. So who should attend this? So really from the business side of things, it's good to have senior stakeholders in there so they can start to see where is the potential for automation, what is the demand for it. And they also help with the review call at the end. Budget holders, so if anybody is responsible for making this happen from a funding perspective, it's good to have those people involved as well, so they can see what the potential is, what the return on investment will be, and they can help to shape with any budgetary aspects that we need to have. The process owners, so people maybe own that process in the business, and the business users, so the people who are actually doing the job. I've done this without business users, and these workshops haven't been successful. The reason for that is that the business users are the ones that understand what they do on a daily basis. They understand the volumes, they understand the nuances of the process. And so having their input is invaluable. From an IT perspective, if you have any business analysts or any architects within the business that are interested in kind of what automation looks like, how you start to ask these automation specific questions, that's good. And if you're already on your automation journey, bring in the RPA developers as well, because they may be the ones that are going to be potentially building out some of the ideas that have been identified. So don't just see this as being a workshop format that is just for organizations that have never done anything with automation. For some organizations, they reach a plateau when it comes to their automation pipeline. And workshops like this can help you to migrate, to progress automation within your organization a little bit further. I think that's it, Karen. Preparation, yes. So good thing about this workshop format, there's no technical knowledge required to attend this workshop. So we bring all of that knowledge, all of that expertise. Each attendee should try and identify one or more areas from the business that would like to submit as an idea. So some of the things that they find that are tedious, that are painful, that are repetitive, that are the sort of thing that on a Monday morning they don't want to come downstairs and sit at the desk and do. And as I say, it would be advantageous to have some kind of IT representation in their workshop, but it's not a key requirement. So if you're interested in this, then please contact your UiPath representative. We've got a few guys on the call today, and we're more than happy to kind of look at what your needs are and maybe look at setting a date to have a workshop with you. And hopefully that was useful as a way to how you can really kickstart or accelerate your automation pipeline. I'd like to thank you for your time and hand over to the next presenter. Rocco, thank you.
So thank you for that, Dean. Sorry, Rocco. Contact information will be supplied later. So if you're wondering now, it will be made available towards the end of the presentation. Thanks very much. Rocco, who's going to talk to us about the Oxford City Council, your RPA journey so far. So welcome, Rocco. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Dean. Hi, everybody. So RPA, Robotic Process Automation. It's an interesting one. I embarked upon the RPA journey about 2 years ago, just after I joined Oxford City Council. So I joined in Valentine's Day, actually, 2018. It's been a love fest ever since, I guess. One of the first things I did when I came in was have a look at, as you do, coming into IT, how the IT service was viewed by the organization. And fortunately, my predecessors had done a great job of stabilizing the infrastructure and getting most things working, which was really helpful. So I was able to immediately start looking at what was important for the organization. And Oxford, as this slide puts forward, is a lovely city, but it's got some really big challenges, both in terms of housing. I mean, the average house cost is about £570,000, which is incredibly expensive compared to the rest of the country. That makes it difficult to recruit IT staff and many other staff, but there are a number of problems within the city, as well as it being a beautiful place, not least now with COVID and our 7 million annual visitors that generates income for the city and for the council has fallen off a cliff. So we have existing challenges and new ones. Specifically thinking about RPA, there were a few internal challenges. So next slide, please, Karen. So I've been around quite a few councils in my time, and public and private sector over many, many years. And Oxford City, like all, if not most, if not all councils, has a wide range of business systems which reflect the diversity of services. Councils are often challenged as to why they are so complex. And the reality, I guess, as you will well know, is that we have so many different services. We are like a combination of every possible service, and therefore we have a multitude of systems. And as with most councils, a lot of those systems have been there for many years. Interfaces are undocumented. The processes are built around processes that have been around for many, many years, and very many of those processes are inefficient. And data quality is always an issue. I don't think I've been in a council where they haven't talked about single view of the customer, single view of assets and so forth. And it always seems like something that's quite unreachable and very expensive to achieve. So many challenges. And in looking around and in reviewing what was developing within the market, RPA appeared to be one of those maturing technologies, maturing solutions that would work. So one of the first things I did was put forward proposals as to looking at RPA as a possible means of addressing some of those challenges. So if we look at the next slide, please. So this may interest several of you that are thinking about RPA, which is how we approached the procurement process and why eventually we went with T-Impact. It's not an advert for T-Impact, but it will just go through a little bit of the journey. We started off, as many of you will do, by going through a full procurement exercise. And I'm not sure about yourselves, but after a year and 6 months or 18 months, it was a painful process with all the bureaucracy that you get wrapped around a procurement exercise. We shortlisted down to 3 organizations, they presented, and we walked away from it from a business perspective, not happy at all. And in fact, we pulled the procurement at that point. Why did we do that? Because we hadn't really got a clue as to what we were looking for. You know, we knew that RPA was a good thing, sounded good, you know, all the marketing was excellent, but actually, when it came down to it, the actual cost that hit us in terms of the procurement thing was just blew the business case out of the water, and because we approached it the wrong way. So we learned a couple of lessons in the exercise of procurement, which was actually that we needed to know a little bit better about what tools were out there. And there are 4 or 5 international tools that are really, really good, and a variety of smaller organizations proposing their own proprietary RPA. And what we wanted was something that would give us sort of an open market opportunity, so we weren't tied into a single vendor. At the same time, we didn't want to throw all of our eggs into one basket by tying ourselves down with a long-term contract and then finding that we couldn't do anything with it. That's something that happened. So we took some time to look at the various technologies out there, and we eventually settled on UiPath for a simple reason. Whilst they're all kind of similar in their approach, the UiPath had the advantage of having a community edition, which meant that because we've got technologists within the team, people that know a little bit about writing software and so forth, we were able to, quotes unquote, play with UiPath using the community edition, which is free, and it's very, very good, excellent. You can actually do quite a lot of stuff with it. The other vendors would have required a lot more investment in terms of buying the systems up front. So that gave us the opportunity, first of all, to try it out ourselves. So we settled on UiPath as the option. We then chose to go through digital marketplace to identify a vendor that would be able to support us in that initial proof of value, proof of concept journey, which we'd focused on. And we settled on T-Impact because as well as being a local organization, which always ticks good boxes, they were responsive, they were flexible, and they were transparent. So all the things that you want with somebody that's not there to push the sale, but actually to help you drive things forward, which is a good thing. So after a long-winded preamble, we went through digital marketplace, really good way to sign up with a contract. But we didn't actually procure in the initial phases any software whatsoever. We settled on using the community edition, and we used T-Impact to provide development resource. So that gave us the means to go in with a low cost proof of concept, which would prove to the organization that the solution worked or not. If we move on to the next slide, that was 6 months ago. So over the past 6 months, and I'll touch on in a moment how we approach this with the business moving forward, but we reached out to various parts of the organization that were keen on automating stuff. So our approach was not to go top down and say, hey, everybody, you've got to find something that you can automate and we will do it, because this is a new technology, a new approach to doing business systems processing that people weren't familiar with. So we reached out to those parts of the organization that had an appetite for resolving some of their existing problems. And interestingly, we thought at the beginning we would struggle, that there would be resistance to change. You know, people like the way they do things. They also perceive occasionally robots as being a threat to jobs. And what we did then was not go down the avenue of trying to convince people that this was not the case or was the case, but effectively to reach out to those parts of the organization that had urgent requirements to do to improve what they were doing, whether that was because they are tight on budget or because they were struggling to actually deal with backlogs and so forth. What we found was actually a wide range across the organization of service areas that were actually very keen to be part of the proof of concept. Revenues and benefits and the finance team generally, using a very old version of Academy for revenues and benefits, which believe me, if you are going to do RPA with Academy Revs and Benefits, then take a deep breath, because that system's very clunky. But thanks to the guys from T-Impact and the developers working on that, we actually got automations in place, which do a lot of the data cleansing on the revenues and benefits system. Painful though it was, not from an RPA perspective, but from an Academy perspective, we got it working, and that's making a significant difference to the team. Automation of email is another one, which is actually pretty straightforward. I don't know about yourselves, but we have something like 180 online forms. Probably 50% of those don't actually do anything other than generate an email. So they're not integrated into back-end systems. With RPA, you can take those emails because they come through as structured emails from the online forms, and you can drop them into any and all of the line of business systems, which is something we've been doing. And that's really, really good, because that's taken out probably 2 FTEs worth of effort on a weekly basis of having to key in emails into various business systems. Pretty straightforward as well. So again, just in terms of ease and in terms of cost of implementation, very low. Another problem we had was we have something in the region of 200 business systems. And as many of you will know, keeping a track of licensing can be a bit of a challenge, particularly when you have people leaving, handing over their laptops, not advising IT. And so these people hand over a laptop with a license on, which is no longer required by the other person, so on and so forth. Software license optimization was something we thought about because we had a challenge with license costs. And we run it over a number of our systems. So we've written a script in RPA that essentially runs through each of our business systems for the licensing aspects on the back end, and compares it to our Active Directory to actually map licenses to people that are still in the organization. And you would be surprised at how many savings you can generate just by running that on a quarterly basis. So again, something very useful that would have been quite manually intensive, but that we've done. Manual timesheet data entry, again, same thing. We're putting in a new housing system. At the moment, it doesn't have an automation to take the timesheets of staff that are working out on the road into the system. And again, taking a PDF timesheet from each of these members of staff, reading the PDF, dropping it into our line of business system is another automation that we've done that's made big inroads into reducing the amount of double keying. And finally, we are, as I mentioned, we're implementing a new housing system called Arian, which is interesting in itself, replacing our Northgate system. And along the way, we discovered that there were a number of interfaces to the financial system that hadn't been identified in the initial business analysis. And we identified those pretty much towards the end of the project. So that would have increased costs significantly in terms of having to build interfaces, APIs into various systems, test them, and so on and so forth. So we used RPA, the UiPath system, to effectively replace manual keying or the APIs with a process which takes the data from the housing system and pushes it into the financial system. And we did that in 2 weeks at minimal cost. And that is now going to go into the live system. There's no need to build APIs, which is a very interesting opportunity moving forwards. So that was our approach. That's why we chose T-Impact. That's what we've done over this proof of value, proof of concept thing. If we move on to the next slide, So what can I share with you guys in terms of what I've learned and what we've learned along the way in the last few months? So when I was asked to prepare this slide, I sort of did a brain dump, and I think I've mentioned some of these. Choose the product that best meets your technology and business capability. We're quite lucky insofar as we've got a few people that understand software development, and UiPath requires you to know a little bit about C++, C#, Visual Basic, stuff like that to be able to use it yourself. Otherwise, you're dependent upon third-party developers, which can increase the cost. So we went with UiPath because whilst we will use developers, we also want to build our own center of excellence. And to that end, we're now recruiting an RPA full-time employee to help us along the way and to reduce our development costs. Identify quick wins within the business and supportive sponsors up front, as I mentioned. Part of the reason that the proof of concept then got approved by the board and has gone live is because we had those supportive members of the organization that were keen and interested to automate. That helps a lot. I mentioned digital marketplace as a route. I've mentioned the vendors as well. Choose one with a vested interest in your success. Next point is quite important. Automation doesn't just happen. You need service engagement and a dedicated vendor. I'll just expand on that a little bit as well, because I went into this exercise thinking it should be relatively straightforward. Once we've got an understanding of RPA and the tool, we can knock up processes really, really quickly. And I don't think that's wrong. But around that, there's a lot more that needs to go on. So the engagement with the business, the process of engaging with the business, once you go with a full-blown live production solution, it will sit there unless the business continues to engage with you and unless you continue to be able to develop processes. And just this morning, I was talking with the board about this point, and one of the suggestions that came out was that it needs to be driven top down. The good news, if you will, in what is otherwise a bad time, is that councils are now very strapped for cash, more so than they were 3-4 months ago. And regardless of whether we look at headcount or we look at improving customer service and so forth, RPA does give you the means to take out a lot of repetitive work, which I think Dean mentioned earlier, but it also allows you to take out cost when you put in new systems, when you have to change systems, by avoiding expensive APIs and stuff like that. It helps you with data analytics as well. It can be used to cleanse data. So if you want to make the most of the information you've got in your systems, it's very good at that. And as I mentioned, it also takes out cost of licensing. So it's not simply in the high volume repetitive processes that RPA helps, but it's actually in the whole life cycle of building, implementing, maintaining systems and maintaining costs at a reasonable level. So you can use it for all those things. But that means it needs focus, it needs resource, it needs the time, not only for the implementation, but actually once it's in. And if you think that you're just going to put it in like any tool and then it'll run itself, it won't. So you need to have a structure that will allow you to support that going forward. If not, what you will find is the costs of development can then start to outweigh the real benefit that you can get from a multitude of processes. So I would certainly recommend trying to build your own center of excellence, potentially tied into a data analytics team. We phased it by having a proof of value, which was necessary because that's what the board asked for. But I think it's a good way of testing the waters before you go full blown. And as we move forward, one of the things we are definitely going to do is establish a means of measuring the benefits, the return on investment for each process, because as a result of the positive outcomes of the proof of concept phase, I've now got people clamoring to have their processes automated. And the challenge of that, whilst it's good, is that some or several of the people that are asking for automation of processes are people that have got a very loud voice in the organization. And we know what that means politically with a small p. But equally, they're asking to automate processes that maybe have 3 or 4 or 5 transactions a week, which you really don't want to be doing. You know, so there is, and it's absolutely critical that you have an agreed approach to what goes first in terms of the automation, so you get the biggest bang for your buck. And finally, the other lesson we've learned towards the end of this process, and we're still in the conversation with T-Impact, is that whilst using the community edition is pretty straightforward, you stick it on a laptop that's got enough memory and you batch process and run your processes by pressing a button. When you move to the full production environment, which has got a cloud component with the orchestrator, and it's got a either in your data center or an on-prem component with a server and so on and so forth, there is a little bit of extra effort that needs to be put in to get the production environment up and running. Not a lot, but it's slightly different to the community edition. And then when you move from the community edition to the production environment, you have to refactor the code that was written so that it works in a different environment. So these were things we weren't aware of. We are now. Whilst they will not have a big impact, it just knowing that is just useful to know that you need to transition from proof of concept to live. Okay. Next slide, just to wrap up then for everybody. As I said, we're moving into the production infrastructure now, which is an interesting one. And what we are going to be doing now is defining a roadmap of RPA projects. I have the CFO, who's very keen on RPA now, having been a firm detractor at the start, because I think he's seen the value, the potential value of this in terms of cost savings. So not to be underestimated that it can generate real cost efficiencies. But again, as I said before, the thing that you need to recognize is that it's not a tool that you put in and works. My analogy is that RPA is like a screwdriver. Without it, you can't do anything. But with it, you need somebody that knows how to use it and use it well. And you need things to be able to screw down. So getting RPA in is the first step, but having the resource and the processes in place is absolutely key. And I think that is where I can wrap up now. So back to you guys.
Thank you, Rocco. Very interesting, very informative, and thanks for being so open and candid as well. So yeah, it was very good. Thank you very much. Right. Now we're going to pass over to T-Impact, and Keith is going to talk to us. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks, Ian. Next slide, please. Right, so we shared some insights into the RPA benefits and lessons learned in our previous two webinars. In this one, we wanted to share a step-by-step guide to your RPA program and the typical deliverables. And the goal I set for myself was to give you a one-page summary, so I only have 2 slides, this one to introduce and the next. When you're thinking about your RPA program, you're looking to change the way your business operates. So Rocco spoke quite eloquently about the process inefficiencies and people actually looking for ways of making their job easier and taking a lot of this tedious work away. So, but your aim in the initial stage is really to gather information and develop a governance structure for confident decision-making throughout. So as you're trying to build support for the initiative, you're going to be competing potentially with hundreds of others for management support and budget and resources. So you generally require a vision that inspires and a roadmap that demonstrates how this vision will be delivered in the stages that you'll go through. Once you've established a sense of urgency and gained the support for the required coalition of decision makers, you need to demonstrate some success with a quick win. And quick win could be a very simple proof of concept or a demo, or it might be a full program increment, typically three to 4 RPA projects that are taken right through into production. And the final point I'd make in this overview slide is don't underestimate the effort to move from your first quick win into full deployment. There's a technical effort of moving from something that was built for a demo to something that's full production, as we mentioned earlier, but also the level of investment required to keep your stakeholders and influencers involved and informed, so that you don't lose your share of the budget and resources that are being allocated out to improve the way your council works. Next slide, please. So breaking those 4 down: vision, roadmap, quick wins, and full deployment. If we look at the vision, The effort for stakeholder analysis is often underestimated. Just because you know the key stakeholders in your organization doesn't mean you necessarily know their opinion to this particular program. So it's really important to understand their power and their influence over this specific program so you can help decide how much time to invest in each one of those stakeholder relationships and how best to communicate with them, you know, to give them what they need and what they care about for your program. We find that the best way of raising awareness is roadshows using existing governance forums, if you have them, project boards, change committees, whatever your local governance forums are named, and supplemented with a broad-based roadshow to really raise awareness to start people thinking about where those opportunities are. And when you're looking at aligning this to the outcomes for your business objectives, you really need to understand where you're going to deliver value and where does it matter. So you're focusing on the right thing. Once you've got all this in place, then you can publish your change vision and start working on sponsorship, and particularly in setting forth a structured communication plan that sets out to build the support and maintain that throughout the program. Next slide, please. So when looking at the roadmap, I think Dean gave a very good summary of idea to bot approach. And one thing that we found in working with a number of local councils now is there's a danger of A, becoming fixated on a certain process, which may not be the best process for your quick win, or B, overanalyzing, spending too much time trying to figure out which is exactly the right process. And in reality, what's important is to get started, start to identify a list of things to look at, triage those to identify the top 2 or 3 that are worth further investigation. And we do that with an organization assessment. It's a one-day workshop. You really want to understand the business benefits. You want to understand the scope and the cost, because with that information, you can determine what the net benefit is going to be and what your return on investment. Which is really useful when you're challenged for resources, to get sponsorship and to get resources allocated, and then when you're challenged for resources throughout the delivery. It's important to note that while it is important, as Rocco pointed out, to have your development resources, your technical resources in place, you also need to think about the subject matter experts or the business users or frontline staff, whatever terminal you want to use. The people who understand the process will have to give you time so that you can understand those processes and build a solution that's actually going to work in their environment. Armed with this information, you can start preparing your roadmap and define a number of program increments. We typically use 8 to 12 weeks per program increment, generally 3 to 5 RPA projects per program increment, to build out a roadmap and to really start accelerating that project as you go through. You can obviously get a couple of program increments running in parallel if you want to accelerate that journey even faster. Next slide, please. On the quick wins, it's easy to assume that because the robots can sit on the cloud, there's not a lot of infrastructure work. But the thing you need to, you should appreciate is the robot's going to be interacting with your IT systems. So you need to have access to those IT systems in a test environment. If any vendor tells you that they can test in production, slam down the phone and never speak to them again. You really need to set your test environments up as you would with any other software development. Robots are really fast. If you make a mistake, it's going to make lots of mistakes very quickly. So it's important to have a good and robust test environment that you can, for your system that your robot's going to work with, that you can easily load up with the data you want for proper testing. When we talk about process discovery, lots of people imagine work that they've done in the past. Sorry for the background noise. When we go along to speak to organizations, quite often say, oh, we've got our processes documented already, or we've got a pretty good understanding, won't take that long. You'll probably find that you will document your process to in a greater level of detail than you ever have before as part of an RPA project. You need to understand not just what happens when everything goes well, but every variation or scenario flow through your process, every type of exception, even if the robot's not dealing with the exception, if it's handing it over to a human, it needs to know how to detect that exception so it can hand it over appropriately. then of course the configuration of the solution, which we've talked about quite a bit. And then as you start building out your solutions, your workflows, the important thing is having an iterative cycle of playing that back to the team that's actually going to use it, to confirm that you're building up the features that are going to deliver the benefits. As with any IT project, there's a risk that you start to run short of time, or that there's 1,001 small decisions being made by the technology team, and you make sure that you're sense checking that back against what you set out when your business case is say, we're going to deliver these benefits, and these benefits are delivered through these features. In the playbacks, we focus on those features that are delivering the benefits and ensuring that they're usable in the environment that they're being implemented in, so that when we get to the end of the playbacks and we're ready to go into acceptance testing, we know that we're actually going to hit the benefits that were projected. And of course, acceptance testing and deployment, if you're doing anything other than a demonstration or a quick proof of value, you want to make sure that it's very robust before you put it live. Next slide, please. Inspect and adapt. So once you go into full deployment, it's really worth mining the information that you're generating out of your bots to determine what the business benefits actually are. There's been a number of cases where we worked and prepared a business case, and we found that the benefits was actually much higher, occasionally lower, but generally much higher than anticipated, because the split of transactions was different than anticipated. So we thought that a larger percentage of exception processes would be handed over to humans than actually were. So it's really worth having that realistic information, and generally worth the investment to do some automated reporting on the benefits, and the UiPath Suite's got some fantastic tools to enable that. As you start thinking about, as you start monitoring the data that's coming out of the robot, particularly the audit log, you're going to get a better view of what actually happens in real life in your processes than you've ever had before. It would be next to impossible to piece this level of granular information together from your existing IT systems and the things that your staff do outside of the IT systems. With the robot, that typically is going to span more than one system. You're getting that audit log detail, and if you've captured the right data in the audit log, it'll enable you to identify things that you could adapt your robot to do to take care of a larger percentage of the transactions. And again, particularly exceptions that you may not have been able to define business rules with upfront. You can define those rules by interrogating that audit log. Communicating success. So you quite often, by the time you get to full deployment, you've done your quick win, you've won people over. You think, hey, our change program's underway. I've got everybody on board. But you're going to be continually challenged, because there's going to be other initiatives and other priorities coming up and changes to the business on a day-by-day basis. So it's really important to keep those stakeholders on board, really important to keep the department and team leads on board who are allocating their staff's time, and really important to keep frontline staff, keep everybody, keeping everyone aware of the benefits that you are delivering and how well things are proceeding. And then, of course, you can continue with your roadmap, delivering the next program increments as defined. And then over time, either up front, as Rocco's set out to do, or over time, build your internal capability. And you've got quite a number of assets available to help you with that. UiPath Academy has some fantastic training, which is online. A reasonable percentage of that is absolutely free and leads to certification. So it's motivational for your staff as well. At T-Impact, we've got a Center of Excellence program that we supplement the UiPath training with some classroom style training, plus some IP or intellectual property, things like developer toolkits that help to accelerate your journey. So in closing, as a special offer to attendees, we're making the deliverables that you see at the bottom in the blue boxes available to everyone who's signed up for our newsletter. And we plan to send out about a template every 2 weeks. We hope you've enjoyed this local council webinar series. This is the third of 3 and the final episode. So I'll now hand back to Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Again, very interesting, very informative. We have time now for a few questions and answers, so I will invite members to join the panel, and that's Rocco, if you could join Keith and Stephen from UiPath. I think Dean as well from UiPath as well. So I have a number of questions that come through. I think the first one for you is, Rocco, is, and again, I'll caveat this by saying subject to your confidentiality, etc. How soon do you think the council will benefit financially from robots?
It already is. So with proof of concept, we've
Rocco, can't hear you, sorry.
I'm off mute, but my microphone's on top of my head. There we go. How's that?
That's better. Thank
Excellent.
you. Cheers.
Yeah. So I was saying we're already benefiting insofar as I described the on the housing replacement project. We've probably saved something in the region of £200,000 by not having to build 7 APIs into the finance system. So that per se is a return on investment. Similarly, in terms of a reduction of staff demands, we've taken out 3 FTE in terms of resource requirement. Now, obviously, taking out the resource requirement versus taking out the people is a different subject, but that's something for the organisation and the structure of the organisation to decide on, not specifically RPA. So, but what it does mean, I think most councils have something in the region of a churn rate of about 7% of staff per annum. So one of the conversations that's been had in terms of cost efficiencies is to say, if we implement RPA and it starts to deliver those efficiencies in terms of productivity, then we can look at the various service areas in terms of a new organizational model moving forwards, and take the benefit over a number of years as we have staff churning. So staff that leave during the course of the year don't get replaced. So that's the preferred approach that we're adopting as part of this this project.
Thank you, thank you. And do appreciate, and we didn't talk about it in any depth, that a lot of the benefits from automation is not about money. It's about other aspects as well. So it's not all about the dollar.
Yeah, I think one of the phrases we use is to do more with the same, and that's effectively what we're doing at the moment. So instead of having people tied up on manual processing, I think most councils are already stretched in terms of the resources. What this means is that as demand increases, we free up the capacity to actually deal with those demands as well. So win-win effectively, whether it's cost or productivity, we get the gains.
Good, thank you for that. Thank you for that. One for UiPath, Stephen and Dean. Does each task or process need its own robot?
I'll take that one if you want, Steve. This is Dean Murphy. No, it doesn't. So much in the same way that a kind of human worker can do multiple things through the day, so they can multi-skilled and can do multiple processes through the day. A robot is the same. So think of a robot as being a digital worker. And what we automate is actually the process that robot performs. So a single robot could, through the day, perform multiple different processes and activities. And as Keith mentioned, kind of towards the end of his presentation, the insights that you gain from your automation estate, essentially your digital workforce, is invaluable. So if you're getting technical for a moment, if you're looking at an unattended robot, so that's the kind of robot that's going to be doing all the stuff that doesn't require any human involvement. So it could be things like invoice processing, it could be application processing. So in the old days, we would have called that kind of batch type activity. Let's say, for example, we use an invoicing example. It takes 2 hours to perform some invoice processing. We've got 24 hours of capacity for that robot. What do we want it to do for the other 22 hours? So we can layer and layer more and more processes on top of that. And so it's important when we assess your processes for automation that we kind of look at, well, how long do they take today? How long are they likely to take when we automate them? How many transactions do you have? What is the complexity of those? And we can help then to size what your digital workforce needs to look like against the specific processes. But in answer to your question, one robot can perform multiple processes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Stephen, so Keith, one for you. How does someone reach out to you to take advantage of the offerings, deliverables that you were talking about?
Sorry, Ian, you broke out a little bit. Did you say, how does someone reach out to take advantage of the?
Yeah, how does someone, oh, well, it's on screen now. How does someone reach out to T Impact to take advantage of the offerings and services that you were just talking about?
So just sign up to our newsletter. We're going to offer this out to anybody who's on our newsletter, or right through to sales@t-impact.com. Always welcome to write to me directly. My email address is there on the screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and obviously mine is as well. Last question, because we've got time for, and it's an open one. Is GDPR an issue when using robots? I don't know who to pass that one to. So want to take that one up?
I can take it a little bit, and I'm more than happy for Keith to add some color and some depth to my response. So how do you, my question would almost go back to you. How do you deal with GDPR with your human workforce? A lot of it is done through policy and standards and guidance, and essentially, the risk with the human workforce is you're at the mercy of the flaws of the individual. So if you've got a disgruntled worker, they could quite easily just breach your GDPR policy and leak information or share information that they shouldn't share. The thing about a robot is it's never going to be disgruntled. It's never going to expose anything that you don't want exposed. So and because the robot essentially, when it runs, it uses the data and then forgets the data. It's not retaining anything. And because you decide how the robot should behave, essentially you're in control of what the GDPR compliance is with your digital workforce. So the response really comes back to you as to how do you deal with it with a human workforce? And we would look at replicating elements of that. And then essentially a robot can be more GDPR compliant because it's got no personal interest in that data or ever becoming disgruntled. Keith, I don't know if you wanted to add any depth to that.
It was an excellent response, Dean. I just had a couple of things. The other thing that you'll find, not quite on GDPR, but your robot will also never discriminate. So your robot will treat every transaction exactly the same. So unless you've coded it into some specific rules to deal with different target customers in different segments of your customer base in a different way, everybody will be treated the same. There'll be no undue influence, which can be quite difficult with human staff sometimes, even unconscious bias. And the second thing is when we work with customers, there's always an excitement to move to a cloud-based infrastructure. It solves a lot of problems. What we generally say during your quick wins phase, at least, start with an on-premise. If you have an on-premise robot actually installed on your infrastructure, even if the orchestrator is in the cloud, none of your data is leaving outside of your firewall. So everything's inside, the same as it would be with a human worker. In fact, more secure because you don't have it going. A human worker now is going to be accessing it from home, which is another area of vulnerability.
Fine. What we can do right now is to help with that. We can do what we call hybrid automation, where maybe the human triggers something on their machine and their attended robot then hands off to an unattended robot running in your data center where it's got more local access to the data. So essentially we can help even more because we never expose any sensitive information out to the end employee. We allow the robots to communicate with each other to perform given transactions, and when we're looking at sensitive data. And it also has a benefit at the moment where maybe some of your wide area connectivity isn't as strong or as robust or as performant as you need it to be, and therefore the performance of your workforce at home is compromised. Again, because we can put our digital workers in your data center closer to your applications and your data, we can actually drive improved performance as well.
Okay. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Rocco. That concludes the session for today. We've run out of time. I would like to thank you all for attending. I would special thank you to Rocco from Oxford City Council, from Keith from T-Impact, from Dean from UiPath. If you do have any questions or you follow-ups, the contact details are on the screen now. I would again just thank you and say goodbye and stay safe. Thanks very much. Bye.